At the time of this recording, October here in America, it's Filipino American History Month. I would love to have a conversation on the concept of loob. When we translate this in English, it simply means inside, but it really is more translated as the inner being of a Filipino. Now, this concept may be difficult to completely understand in the American culture, and it really makes sense if it sounds complicated. It's because loob cannot be seen, cannot be completely quantified. There's something about this word that can help all of us to understand the worldview of the Filipino better, and how this can also help the Filipino American and the immigrant to lessen their misunderstanding, specifically today, because we hear the word loob in many words as a root word. Kagandahan loob, utang na loob. But today, we're going to be talking about the concept of lakas ng loob. Are Filipinos truly bilingual? We use the same language at home but speak and love languages foreign to each other, together but separated. Kamusta? I'm Roanne, licensed psychotherapist mom, immigrant twice, first-generation Pinoy raising my mixed Filipino-American children in America. I found that after visiting 500 Filipino homes, I continue to be a student of the culture. In this podcast, we would be seatmates in this beautiful cultural classroom. And by the way, did I tell you I need my kapeng barako straight from Batangas before each class? If you're interested in learning the deep intricacies of the Filipino culture, especially as it merged with American culture, talks about trauma-informed care, and deepening your Filipino relationships across generations, which includes my fave topic, Pinoy love languages, you're in the right place. I want to thank you for listening to this Pinoy Love Language podcast. If you've been enjoying the heart-crafted content, our conversation here, I encourage you to leave a review. If that speaks to you, I was told that it helps others to find this podcast. So won't you do that after you listen to this podcast? Simply go to the show notes and there scroll down and simply share how this podcast, not specifically me, but the content, how it has helped you so that others could be also supported in their own Filipino or Filipino American identity, their journey. Kamusta everyone? Thank you for being here. I'm back. I feel like I haven't recorded a podcast for some time, but glad you're still here listening. What is this concept of loob? Again, when you translate loob, it is literally inside, the inside. For a Filipino, the concept of loob goes deeper than that. It's the innermost being of a Filipino. Today, we're going to talk about the concept of lakas ng loob. So when you say lakas, lakas is strength. Okay, so strength of the inside, if you will, verbatim translation for lakas ng loob. Now, what is lakas ng loob? It could be defined or described as grit. It could, like I mentioned, it's strength in the inside. And really what describes someone who is malakas ang loob. So if you describe someone, ay, so-and-so, malakas sa loob niyan, is even though they can't see well enough where they're going, they're gonna basically forge ahead because there is this deep faith that all will be well. Now, why is this valuable to the Filipino? Okay, first, if you are in the motherland, there's a lot of things you cannot control. It's very different as we can imagine living in America. The experience here is very different to the experience of the Filipino in the motherland. Something very simple. You cannot control the traffic. So when a Filipino is trying to arrange their day, they won't put too much on their list. Unlike here, we could almost calculate how long it takes to travel to the post office, and then we'll calculate going to the grocery store, and we can almost calculate about an approximation, but a pretty good approximation on what how long it'll take us and like the time that we will get done. And of course, that's not perfect. For sure, there's traffic here. But in the islands, there's a lot more that we cannot control. You can get stuck in traffic for 2 hours. I think the most that I've been stuck in traffic was probably about 4 hours. I think there was a typhoon, and usually the traffic can be stalled because there might be flood and cars are stopping. But going back, how is this lakas ng loob beneficial to the Filipino first in the islands? There's a lot of things we cannot control. The weather, obviously, we cannot control, but we are the one of the most typhoon visited countries in the world. And so the lakas ng loob is to just keep going. Have you seen that? When I remember when I was a kid, my mom would teach us not to be so joyous because when it's signal number 3, the signal that they assign it on the strength of the typhoon, there's no school. So when we go, yay, walang pasok, basically, yay, there's no school. My mom would always remind us not to be so joyous because there are people who may lose their home. Just their ceiling can fly off. And I've seen that, so going back to grit, to keep going. You see in Manila, even if you just go in Manila, but you see this in a lot of other places, that the Filipino, because there's not a lot of equity as far as like jobs, different types of opportunities, that the Filipino is very creative. They're selling anything. Ice candy. Do you guys know ice candy? It's this kind of juice that you would different flavor, buko, anything. You pour it in a plastic, you freeze it, and people actually sell it like a popsicle. You see many signs that people do that. Service like plumbing. That's pure grit. People are just really moving despite what is seen as a lot of obstacle. Lakas ng loob. So that really serves the Filipino. And also, when you just think about our history, when you think about Magellan, right? I mean, and Lapu-Lapu. Compared to Magellan, Lapu-Lapu probably have the more low-tech weaponry. But he just kind of siege and sugod mga kapatid, like just forge his way. And there you go. We know what happened in history to Magellan because of grit. So that has really served the Filipino. There's another word called segurista. A segurista in Filipino is someone who's the opposite of someone who would take risk. Part of the characteristics of the malakas na loob, not that they're entirely just taking risk, but there's actually a belief that they would succeed. So they're not just risk takers and bahala na si Batman, as they say. If you're from the islands, this is hard to translate, but it's like whatever happens. But a sigurista is one that is extremely averse to risk. They base everything on logic, on data, and computation. And that's well and good. I think we want to always balance. Someone who's malakas na loob is attuned more. The O, which is the obstacle, is an opportunity for someone who is malakas ang loob. And you've heard the concept of bahala na. I think they do have that sense of fate, not from a fatalistic belief of, again, just doing whatever or not thinking of thyself, but it's the belief that is the fate that I'm likely to succeed. And there's a keen use of the senses, not just data, which they could also use, but it's this like feeling, a gut feeling. It's coming from the gut, this malakas ng loob. And how is this honed, you might ask? It is honed through play. When you're playing, you're not sure if your playmate is going to throw the ball. There's a lot of novelty that is introduced in the body. Malakas ng loob is like if you're playing patintero. This is hard to explain in this podcast. Watch a video on YouTube, right? So it's like you create a line. We usually just use chalk or line it with water. So this game of patintero is somebody is blocking you and you have to cross your opponent until you reach the other end. So you start from one end to the other end. When you're playing games like this, it's like you're moving back, you're moving. It's like a dance. And there's also trust in the collective that goodness, if you ever fail, somebody's going to catch you, or hopefully. Now, how does this help the Filipino American? It helps the Filipino American to remember. It's a reminder that you can also follow your gut, that came from your ancestral lineage. How we know that is because our ancestors lean into nature and their bodies. That's why we have the word pakikiramdam. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about that, I've written actually a new article, and it's actually an article not just for Filipinos. I'll link that in the show notes, and if you're interested, check it out. It's using pakikiramdam as a healer. Going back for Filipino Americans to remember that is your gift. It's your indigenous gift. And the key to that is to clear your channel, your intuition, to hone your intuition. Again, how do you hone that? It's by playing. Okay? So you might be thinking, oh gosh, playing, that's just for kids. Actually, try it. When you're playing, it's very creative. When you're creative, you keep getting creative. It's like there's more of it. And there's this quote from Maya Angelou that now I'm forgetting. But basically, the more you create creativity, the more you use it, the more that you have it. You're not just always calculating data, but you can. I think that's also a good balance to do that. No one is saying just to be a risk taker for the sake of being a risk taker. It is actually a belief in the universe. And that, my friend, is really what I want to share. It's really about knowing whatever the source you feel. You don't even have to call it God, but it's that soul that you have. Whether that soul is aligned to you with nature, even simply by you having dogs, if you call it God, whatever you call it, that, I'm talking about that. The person who has lakas ng loob knows this. Not only knows this, it believes in this, breathes this, know this by heart. So, this is probably a rather shorter Pinoy Love Language episode, but I hope it serves you well. Whether you are a Filipino immigrant in the islands, Filipino American, know that you have that soul in you, the soul to know that beyond information, that beyond logic, that you can trust yourself. You have it in you. Your only role to make sure is that your channels are clear, which means if you have unprocessed wounds, that you take care of that, you nurture yourself. Because that, my friend, you might think that your compass based on your wounds may take you to the right place. It might actually confuse you when the channels are not working well. It's almost like having a compass, but the compass is off. It's going to take you somewhere else. But there's no right or wrong compass. But where you take yourself, where the compass takes you, is where you ought to be. So I'm gonna end there, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if this serves you well, share with others. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig at sa ulitin. Bye now!